Hello, we're here with Jose Lopez, who is a candidate for Boston City Council District 7. And we're here to ask him two questions on Boston Public Schools. So the first question is, what do you believe is the current state of the Boston Public Schools? A, what grade would you give it now? And B, what grade would you give them when Marty Walsh started 4 years ago?
Sure. Thank you, David. Thank you for having me. Boston Public Schools, that's a tall order to give Boston Public Schools a grade. Number one, because it's the oldest school district in the nation. And so I'm trying to grade something that was around before anyone that I know of who was alive, right? Something that dates back to before the state's constitution was even written. I will tell you this, I don't think that's a good question to ask, because to try to give the Boston Public Schools a grade, a school system that dates back before the founding of this country's constitution, would probably achieve as much in capturing the potential, the history, the future of that school system in its entirety and what it can do, what it has done. It would probably capture as much about that school system, I think, as an MCAS score might capture about a student. An MCAS score does not do a great job in capturing, I think, the history, the potential, and the future of a student. What I would ask or answer is, what could be possible in Boston Public Schools as a school district? Mayor Marty Walsh was elected in 2013. The Boston School District is a lot larger than he is, than any one mayor or collection of mayors. What's great about Marty Walsh at this moment is that he has an opportunity to really work with our Boston Teachers Union, our parents, our children, the other residents and stakeholders of public education in Boston, to decide not what the grade of Boston public schools might be, but really what our vision is going to be for public education when it comes to the city of Boston. See, public education here has a magnificent history, a history that I don't think is told often enough. As a matter of fact, the provision to include public education as part of what a society or a government would provide its citizens started here in Massachusetts with John Adams, who wrote the first provision for providing a public education in the state constitution for Massachusetts, which predates our United States Constitution. And he was the first individual to ever introduce such a provision into a constitutional convention, and at first was hesitant and thought that people might not think it was a good idea for the framers of the state constitution to put that burden on state legislatures. But he ultimately decided that he would introduce it. And I think all but 5 towns at the time in Massachusetts that were required to sign off on the Constitutional Convention allowed it to go through without even a comment, because all of them understood that to protect citizens and empower them to exercise their full citizenship and be active participants in our republic required that they be educated. As a matter of fact, listen to this. It shall be the duty of the legislatures to cherish the interests of literature and the sciences, for the promotion of agriculture, arts, sciences, commerce, trades, to inculcate. Now listen to the type of person they had in mind when they wanted to educate a citizen. They wanted to make sure that we taught children the principles of humanity, general benevolence, public and private charity, industry, frugality, honesty, and punctuality, sincerity, good humor, and all social affections and generous sentiments among the people. That's the caliber of education that the founders wanted to create here in Massachusetts. And that's the history of Boston's public schools. So if we try to grade Boston public schools, we really have to look at that larger vision and ask ourselves, how do we make that possible here today? How do we encourage, support, and challenge our current mayor, Mayor Marty Walsh, to execute and reach that vision of a public education for children? And it is absolutely possible here. Unlike any other town, I would argue, in Massachusetts. In Boston, that is possible. We have a teacher union president, Jessica Tang, who in her own right is a remarkable figure, who was the first woman of color elected to that position, who is bringing in with her a vanguard of educators and education experts who put the child at the center of education. And working together, we can achieve, I think, what John Adams and the founders wanted to produce in terms of the quality of a citizen in Boston public schools. I mean, the history of Boston public schools, it created people like J.P. Morgan. I don't know if you knew that. John Hancock, Louis Sullivan, who was one of the chief architects and whose architecture is studied by every architecture student in the United States. Mel King out of the South End, Melnia Cass, Amanda V. Houston. These are people who were graduates of Boston's public schools and who would go on to contribute to not just Boston as a city, but really to the history and vision of this country. That's the type of Boston public schools that I think about when I think about what's possible. And I think it is that vision that people here would love to see Boston get back to and get busy producing. It is possible, and I think we can get there with the right type of vision.
All right, thank you. So the second question is, what specifically are you going to do to improve them? A, how many schools are you going to visit? B, what programs should you add or subtract? And C, how much more money, if any, do you think the schools need?
Sure. When it comes to visiting schools, I mean, that's an easy answer. It'd be all of them. It's not a hard task. Our district is not too large to prohibit any elected official or person for visiting each and every one of them in 2 years. We're talking about around 125 schools that are here. As a matter of fact, when I was teaching, and I'm very proud to have been a former educator, I'm very proud to have been a member of our Boston Teachers Union. And while I was teaching, I taught during the regular school day, after school, and summer school. And I made sure that I deliberately did not do either of those at the same location. Because my plan was, if I can teach in different parts of the city, I would get to know more parents, more families, and that would further inform my instruction and help me build positive relationships across the city of Boston. So I have every intention in getting to and visiting each of those schools, speaking to parents, speaking to principals and families, and finding out from them, what is it that they need in order to achieve this vision, this larger vision of what's possible in public education in Boston. In terms of programming or programs I'd like to see more of or remove, Boston, unlike many school districts, is housed in a city that is saturated with philanthropic organizations, nonprofits, experts in education and different sectors, music. Boston has a great potential in partnering in unprecedented ways and imaginative and creative ways with all of these partner colleges, hospitals, organizations that could really come in and fundamentally transform the experience of a child and a family going through Boston public schools. We already have amazing programs. I think of Tenacity. I think of City Year. I think of these organizations that at almost no cost, in terms of being a line item on our budget, are providing invaluable support and resources to children, their parents, their families, teachers, and principals. We need to add more of that here in Boston, and we can. There is way too much for us to not capitalize on and bring that into our classrooms. We have way too many very smart, very talented, very capable organizations, individuals to bring in and serve our children. And so we just need to do more of that. And if we do more of that, just imagine the type of educational experience a child would have starting at 4, 5, entering a Boston public school classroom, and then them leaving when they're 17. The type of growth, the type of exposure, the opportunities for them to become sort of empowered, for them to see their own future, for them to imagine what they can be. Imagine the inspiration that we could provide in our classrooms if we did more of that. So I would definitely push to really examine our partnerships and ask ourselves, what more can we do? What are we missing? What else can we give? The third part of that had to do around resources, money. I'll tell you this. Boston does have one of the highest per pupil expenditures in the Commonwealth. And what's allocated per pupil here is more than many districts. Boston, however, does have another opportunity to provide more. I don't know what that number is, but I will tell you this. Judge Botsford, who was a justice on the Supreme Judicial Court, ruled that in order to make, or not ruled, excuse me, she concluded in a report that in order to make educational experiences in Boston or across Massachusetts more equitable when comparing one district to another, she felt that we had to revisit the way that we funded our public educational system, what's commonly referred to as Chapter 70 funding and other types of funding. She concluded that what school districts were actually spending in education showed that there were still disparities in funding in public education here in Boston. And I think she's right. I think revisiting whether or not the amount of money that we're spending in Boston public schools is sufficient to provide the type of education that I was alluding to earlier, the type of education that John Adams thought about when he wrote that provision on public education. If we sit down and ask ourselves that hard question, do we have enough to achieve this goal so that every graduate in Boston public schools feels confident in either entering college or entering a trade? If we're able to do that, I think we'll find that we need more resources. But I also know that the resources are there for us. There is additional funding that we can tap into in order to provide that. So again, I think the larger question is asking ourselves, what do we want for children in Boston? What type of educational experience are we interested, and by we, I'm including children, in having while they're attending Boston public schools? And if we create that vision, then all we got to do is draw the map to get there. And we have enough partners here in Boston that we can make that happen.
All right, thank you. This is Jose Lopez, who is running for Boston City Council District 7.
Thank you.